Hello, Serious Survivor here. This is the first in a 4-video series detailing the stages or periods we can expect to experience when SHTF. I believe there are 4 different categories of apocalyptic events. These categories are based on the overall type of event, its immediate impact on the population, and its basic nature. These categories are the grid down, mass destruction, global pandemic, and excessive rule of law. The first video would detail an apocalyptic scenario that is the result of an occurrence of some type that causes the complete failure of the fragile power grid in which we depend severely upon and results in a total loss of not only power but also communication abilities. This would be a situation in which the clear majority of the world's population would easily survive the initial event itself, but the aftermath of this type of event would overpower and rapidly disintegrate the modern infrastructure and societal construction in which humanity has grown so accustomed to and dependent upon. This will be titled the Grid Down category. The second video will focus on situations such as a nuclear attack or nuclear fallout, asteroid impact, and other such events that would cause massive worldwide devastation and possibly the near destruction of mankind, animal, and plant life. This category is called the mass destruction category. The third video details the events that are likely during and after a global pandemic of some kind. This would include worldwide outbreaks of deadly diseases, biological and chemical warfare on a massive level, contagions of all types, and yes, even the zombie apocalypse. This category is called the global pandemic category. The fourth video would discuss scenarios such as martial law, excessive rule of law, military invasion, economic and financial collapse, any situation that results in or leads to an excessive rule of law and use of force by world governments on their people. This will be called the excessive rule of law category. So let's get started. An apocalyptic scenario that results in a total grid down and loss of communications would initially leave the majority of humanity undamaged from the event itself. The resulting aftermath would be the determining factors in survival or death. The types of events that could be the origin range from an EMP, solar flare, or even an attack on the infrastructure such as the power facilities and other systems that support modern living in today's society. This loss of power and communications would cause a worldwide epidemic. The first key to understanding the resulting chaos from these events is to initially understand the immediate impact these events could or would have. Let's assume this is worldwide and all countries are affected equally. An attack, solar flare, or EMP with enough energy could easily destroy most sensitive pieces of electronic equipment and even some of the more robust ones. When contemplating this idea, the initial result may not seem that devastating to some people. But we have to examine the fact that if the majority of electronics are damaged or without power, then even the simplest of systems will not function, which also means the industrial and manufacturing sectors could not produce replacement or repair parts for these devices. Communications would be one of the most noticeable problems to begin with. No matter whether these devices and systems are damaged or not, without power, they will eventually die. This would result in the simplest of solutions being taken from us: connectivity. If one cannot connect with other people or services, then information transfer will come to a standstill. With no information, there is no way to determine exactly what is going on in the world, and more importantly, what is happening close to you. The most basic of social and human services will come to a halt. Traffic lights may not be functional. Law enforcement, fire, and medical can't respond. The first stage, initial chaos. The first stage begins the instant an event occurs. This stage can last from 72 to 96 hours. During this stage or period, some of the population may have a false sense of security, and some may not even take the event seriously. Some will believe government agencies or the government themselves will restore law and order and somehow get the grid back up and running. Some will panic. Some will just sit there. And some will be at least somewhat prepared and have a basic plan. Understanding the severity of a grid down situation and the long-term implications will quite possibly be the key to survival. When this phase hits, as people begin to panic, the rule of law will begin to dissolve and criminal activities such as looting, robbery, and even rape and murder will increase in frequency relative to the population density of the area in which you live. Fires will rage out of control as the local fire departments no longer have the means or personnel to fight them. All shipments will cease immediately, no more deliveries of food and supplies, and the store shelves become barren overnight. Gasoline tanks and stations are quickly drained and robbed of their resources, leaving behind only a very limited amount of materials. With no shipments, no production from industry, no power, no running water, and the local stores and storage facilities being empty, people are simply left with what they have in their homes or on their persons. With the grid down, people quickly realize there is no more law enforcement and the criminal activity will begin immediately. This will result in riots in the streets, massive fires, and panic. As crime increases and hospitals and social services shut down, the death toll will then grow exponentially. This is the phase that will result in a large number of people succumbing to the crisis and not making it very far into the apocalypse. It's not unreasonable to think 5 to 10% of the population may not survive the first 72 to 96 hours. These will be deaths from dehydration and sickness. Initial events, such as plane crashes and automobile accidents occurring exactly when the event occurs. Surgical failures, fires, weather. For instance, if the event occurs in the heart of winter, many will accede to the cold due to no electricity for warmth. And let's not forget murder. Murder will increase on a level never before seen due to the widespread increase in crime and robberies. Remember, for every one person who has supplies, there are 1,000 people who want to take them. So there will also be massive loss of lives taken in self-defense. This stage will last from 72 to 96 hours. At that point, people will have run out of food and supplies in their home. The riots and chaos in the city streets will be unbearable and deadly to some. Fires will rage throughout the larger metropolitan areas and systems will come to a grinding halt. This is the time people who haven't prepared, at least somewhat, begin to realize the severity of the new world facing them. They will have to evaluate the environment in which they are located and are then faced with the difficult decision of staying in their current location or leaving for areas they believe could be safer. To help prepare for this phase, in an urban area, you have to decide whether you're going to bug in or bug out. Bugging out and bugging in is covered more in depth in other videos on this channel, but for one to survive, one must have supplies or access to them. One must have a plan, and one must have a means to defend themselves if necessary. A decent supply of food and water and at least the means to purify water for 3 to 4 days is required. Some basic first aid supplies for cuts and minor wounds, antibiotics and such. This will be a phase that if you can bug in, one should lock down and stay out of sight. The less people that know where you are, the better chance you have of surviving the initial phase. In a rural area, food will be much easier to find. Also, population density is a major factor. The less people there are in close proximity to you, the less people that can be a threat to you, your family, and your group, if you have a group. In all areas, remember the most visible thing at night is light, as the human eye is attracted the most to both light and motion. Keep lighting from candles, emergency lighting, and such to a minimum, and don't use them if you don't have the absolute need to. In any setting, remember the rule of threes. 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter in brutal weather, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. But also, in most settings, a fire, campfire, or light in most forms is easily visible for 3 miles away, maybe more depending on the environment and weather conditions. If there are people in this range, they will come to see what you have. But the most important factor is planning. I'm not saying spend your entire life dedicated to studying the apocalypse, but have a plan and some supplies so that you can take care of yourself and your family for a short time until you can get to a safe location or decide to stay and defend what you have. Stage 2, the Great Dying. This stage is the beginning of a period that will probably last from the end of stage 1 until approximately 1 to 2 years later. This is when humanity begins to realize that the situation may be permanent and life has changed forever. The world we once knew will be nothing but a distant memory of what once was and what may never be again. In this stage, the loss of power would truly begin to take its toll. In addition to the everyday devices that made life simple not functioning, services that we take for granted every day will begin to fail. These would include sanitation and garbage removal, sewage and wastewater treatment. When these services stop, sickness and disease will soon follow. As garbage starts to pile up, insects, odors, and vermin like rats begin to take control of the streets. Along with the rotting garbage at every street corner, the danger of infection and contagious diseases transmitted from one of these vectors grows. With festering trash laying around, the natural water supplies will easily be contaminated in the larger urban areas. Through this type of contamination, the human race is more susceptible to disease and infection. Without proper methods of disposing of trash and garbage and proper treatment of wastewater, we create an environment for ourselves that can have devastating results. Here are some examples of diseases that could easily spread through an urban environment that is heavily dependent on water, sanitation, and trash. Typhoid. A waterborne disease. People who drink polluted water can become infected with typhoid. Lack of sanitation makes it easier for typhoid to develop. The garbage in the area is a good breeding ground for flies. The flies can then carry the disease and infect more people. Dysentery, a disease that can cause severe diarrhea. If not treated properly, someone can die from it. This is a waterborne illness that is transmitted to a person when they drink the polluted water. Cholera, a disease that causes diarrhea. Cholera is a waterborne disease that can be dangerous to everyone that lives in an unsanitized environment. Hepatitis A and hepatitis E. These diseases spread under unsanitary conditions through human feces. People catch the virus by taking in contaminated water or food. No specific treatment or antibiotic drug exists for either hepatitis A or E. Those suffering are urged to rest, stay hydrated, and try to eat nutritious foods. These are just a few, but it illustrates a point that contamination and disease will be a huge factor in survival. Another factor that will come into play during the beginning of this phase are the animals and insects that will feed off the stagnant, contaminated garbage and water. These animals, such as rats and other vermin, along with insects such as flies and mosquitoes, the risk of being affected by disease will be at a much higher percentage than before. The basic timeline of these events would coincide with the end of the first phase. People's pantries will be bare and the store will have nothing to offer. Riots will have started fires that still burn out of control. These fires can rapidly spread across a major city, leaving devastation and desolation in its wake, a true apocalyptic environment by any definition of the word. Trash and garbage begin to pile up and contamination will seep into the water supplies. Diseases will form and bacteria will spread. Small insects and animals will assist in spreading these diseases. It doesn't take a rat's bite to infect you. If an infected rat, mouse, or other animal simply eats from the same food supply you are, you have very well been infected. The Black Plague from centuries ago proved this. There will also be other threats. Gas refineries and nuclear power plants require constant maintenance. Without monitoring and maintenance, these facilities will literally be a ticking time bomb. The gas lines in factories will begin to decay and gas leaks will be an immeasurable threat. A gas leak of a large magnitude can result in contamination of water sources and the soil in close range, not to mention the danger of enormous explosions. One of the nuclear facility's most vulnerable areas is the cooling station that the spent nuclear fuel is cooled and stored in. Without this cooling process, a meltdown is inevitable. A nuclear meltdown and gas leaks or explosions are a reality in this scenario and will cause extensive damage to the areas within a large radius. During the first year, an estimated 90% of the remaining population will not survive. The causes of death range from starvation, exposure to inclement weather, disease, dehydration, contamination, lack of medication and treatment, radiation, fire, explosions from gas leaks, animals, insects, flooding, and criminal behavior such as murder and loss of life from self-defense. This will be the phase that people face their new life, their new reality. Some of the main skills that should be possessed are water purification knowledge, food gathering, storage, and preparation techniques, hunting and fishing, how to build shelter, first aid, and self-defense skills. To last long-term, skills will be the most important factor. Gear will help, but after a year's time, most of the individual's gear will be gone except for maybe a few weapons and some simple necessities. Stage 3. Acceptance and rebuilding. After the first year to two, those who have survived alone or in very small groups will have had to establish more permanent shelters and structures. They will have had to learn to use the environment for sustainment. They will have adapted to life and what it has become. For the larger groups, people will have established territories and have begun building and repairing. For the people that have made it this far, your skills have been tested and you have succeeded so far. This phase is the stage in which people have accepted their new fate and are working to reestablish lines of trade, repairing what they can, growing and harvesting and rebuilding. This is the phase that life has stabilized somewhat, although there will still be many dangers present, such as groups that will attempt to infiltrate or attack and take what they want. So for the groups that have established or developed a rule of law community, combat training and techniques will be an absolute necessity. Also, defensive protocol for protecting the communities in which they have developed. These will range from physical structures to booby traps to ambush and sniper training. Groups will begin to learn, develop, and hone new skills and put all of their personnel to use. In this stage, everyone will play a vital role in rebuilding. Everyone will have a job. Everyone will have a purpose. This is a permanent phase. Once rebuilding has begun, it will continue indefinitely, and eventually mankind will establish a foothold on humanity and morality. From here, survival and life in general will become more steady. A lot of the initial threats, such as disease, riots, fires out of control, and more, will have subsided, and the areas of danger, such as from nuclear fallout and contamination, will be known and avoided. People know where they can and should not go. The greatest threats in this stage will be from mankind itself, but there would still be more to take into consideration at this point. With the lack of modern medicine, there will be higher mortality rates for simple procedures, and childbirth once again become a life or death event for the mother. There would also be the ever-present threat of weather. Without sophisticated equipment, determining if there is inclement weather headed your way or not would be a difficult thing at first. The best way to prepare for life after a catastrophic event in a post-apocalyptic world is to possess the greatest tools anyone can have, and these are skills and knowledge. Skills and knowledge are the key. Developing skills such as the next ones will help in contributing to a group or forming your own. Skills that will help in forming a group and for group survival. First aid and medical. Having a working knowledge with practical experience will make someone an extremely valuable asset to any group. These skills will ensure that any group of people would welcome you into their fold. Carpentry. These skills speak for themselves in a post-apocalyptic environment when the rebuilding phase has begun. Farming and livestock. Having these skills is necessary to efficiently grow various types of food and to raise, tend to, and process livestock and poultry. These are excellent skills to possess. This would also include food preparation, storage, and cooking. Electrical. Although the grid is down, people will eventually bring it back up, or portions of it. It may take several years or even decades, but having a working knowledge of electricity and wiring will make one invaluable. Barterability. Being able to accurately determine the value of items will ensure that you or your group is being fairly treated. Being able to effectively haggle and strike deals is also an excellent skill. Mechanical. It will definitely be necessary to have people who are mechanically inclined and those who can even design and create parts for repair. Teachers and educators. After the dust has settled, there will be a need for those who can teach various subjects. Even in the apocalypse, kids and adults alike have the need for training and education. Firearms and gunsmithing. This goes without question. People who have a great working knowledge of firearms and how to use them, repair them, and even build them will be of great value to any group anywhere. This will also include ammunition production and reloading. Physical labor. Although standard physical labor such as general labor, working in fields, and jobs such as that will be a necessity, basic physical labor does not require much training, but it does require physical attributes. So for one who hasn't developed a large amount of skills, developing physical attributes can make one a valuable member of the group. Science and engineering. Although science and engineering may not be skills that can be developed in a very short amount of time, these are skills that will benefit any group that can obtain personnel like this. The need for those who can design and create sophisticated devices and processes and repair them will definitely assist when rebuilding society. Combat and fighting. No matter what happens, there will be a need for trained people in the areas of combat and fighting. A post-apocalyptic world without an established rule of law will sometimes be a dangerous place. The need for combat skills is fairly evident. Those are a few of the skills that will benefit someone wanting to contribute to a group. It will also benefit a group having personnel who can perform those skills and tasks. A well-rounded group that contains people of various talents stands a much better chance of long-term survival. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope it helps out. So check out the website, SeriouSurvivor.com. There are thousands of manuals, documents, and books on survival, edible plants, medicinal plants and herbs, firearms, self-defense, and every official military training manual I could find, and much, much more. All for free, all the time. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And for now, Serious Survivor, out.